are foundations of Western ideas. Chapter 7, the Hebrews and Judaism. The early Hebrews. Abraham and Moses lead their people. Sometime between 2000 and 1500 BC, a new people appeared in Southwest Asia. They were the Hebrews, ancestors of Israelites and Jews. The early Hebrews were simple herders, but they developed a culture. They become a major influence on later cultures. Much of what is known about their early history comes from the work of archaeologists and formal accounts written by Hebrew scribes. These accounts describe the early history and the laws of Judaism. In time, these accounts became the Hebrew Bible. The Hebrew Bible is largely the same as the Old Testament of the Christian Bible. The beginnings in Canaan and Egypt. The Hebrew Bible traces the Hebrews back to a man named Abraham. One day, the Hebrew Bible says, God told Abraham to leave his home in Mesopotamia. He was to take his family on a long journey to the west. God promised to lead Abraham to a new land and make his descendants into a mighty nation. Abraham left Mesopotamia and settled in Canaan. On the Mediterranean Sea, some of his descendants, the Israelites, lived in Canaan for many years. Later, however, some Israelites moved to Egypt, perhaps because of the famine in Canaan. The Israelites lived very well in Egypt, and the population grew. The growth worried Egypt's ruler, the Pharaoh. He feared that the Israelites might soon become too powerful. To stop this from happening, the Pharaoh made the Israelites slaves. The Exodus. According to the Hebrew Bible, a leader named Moses appeared among the Israelites in Egypt. In 1200 BC, God told Moses to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. Moses went to the Pharaoh and demanded the Israelites to be freed. The Pharaoh refused. Soon after, a series of terrible plagues or distresses struck Egypt. The plagues frightened the Pharaoh so much that he agreed to free the Israelites. Overjoyed with the news of their release, Moses led his people out of Egypt in a journey called the Exodus. In the Israelites, the release from slavery proved that God was protecting and watching over them. They believed that they had been set free because God loved them. The Exodus is a major event in Jewish history, but other people recognize its significance as well. Throughout history, for example, enslaved people have found hope in the story. Before the Civil War, American slaves sang about Moses to keep their hopes of freedom alive. For many years after their release, the Israelites traveled through the desert. When they reached a mountain called Sinai, the Hebrew Bible says God gave Moses 2 stone tablets. On the tablets were written a code of moral rules known as the Ten Commandments. I, Lord, am your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods beside me. You shall not make yourself a sculptured image or any likeness of what is the heavens above, or on the earth below, or in the waters under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord of your God, am an impassioned God. You shall not swear falsely by the name of the Lord your God. For the Lord will not clear one who swears falsely by his name. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Honor your father and mother, that you may long endure on the land that the Lord of your God is assigning you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male or female slave, or his ox or his ass, or anything that is your neighbor's. By accepting the Ten Commandments, the Israelites agreed to worship only God. They also agreed to value human life, self-control, and justice. The commandments shaped the development of their society. The return to Canaan. According to the Hebrew Bible, the Israelites eventually reached Canaan, where they fought the people living there to gain control of the land. After they conquered Canaan and settled down, the Israelites built their own society. In Canaan, the 12 Israel tribes lived in small, scattered communities. These communities have no central government. Instead, each community selected judges as leaders to enforce laws and settle disputes. Before long, a threat arose that called for a new kind of leadership. Kings unite the Israelites. The new threat to the Israelites came from the Philistines, who lived along the Mediterranean coast in the mid-1000s BC. The Philistines invaded the Israelites' land. Frightened by these powerful invaders, the Israelites band together under a single ruler who could lead them in battle. The ruler was a man named Saul, who became success of a military commander. But he wasn't a strong king. He never won the total support of tribal and religious leaders. They often disputed his decisions. King David, after Saul died, a man once of favor with Saul became king. The king's name was David. A young man, David was being a shepherd. The Hebrew Bible tells how David slew the Philistine giant Goliath, which brought him the attention of king. David was admired for his military skills and as a poet. Many of the psalms are attributed to him. For many years, David lived in the desert, gathering support from the local people when Saul died. David used this support to become king. Unlike Saul, David was well loved by the Israelites. He won the full support of Israel tribal leaders. David defended the Philistines and fought and won wars against many other people of Canaan. He established the capital of Israel in Jerusalem. King Solomon. David's son, Solomon, took the throne in about 965 BC. Like his father, Solomon was a strong king. He expanded the kingdom and made nearby kingdoms, including Egypt and Phoenicia, his allies. Trade with these allies made Israel very rich. With these riches, Solomon built a great temple to God in Jerusalem. The temple became the center of the Israel religious life and a symbol of their faith. Invaders conquer and rule. After Solomon's death, in about 930 BC, revolts broke out over who shall be king. Within a year, the conflict tore Israel apart. Israel split into two kingdoms called Israel and Judah. The people of Judah became known as Jews. The two new kingdoms lasted for a few centuries. In the end, however, both were conquered by Assyrians, defeated Israel about 722 BC. The kingdom fell apart. Because most of its people were disappeared, Judah lasted longer, but before long it was defeated by Chaldeans. The diaspora of Jews. The Chaldeans captured Judaism and destroyed Solomon's temple in 584 BC. They marched thousands of Jews to their capital, Babylon, to work as slaves. The Jews called it enslavement. The Babylonian captivity, it lasted about 50 years. In 530 BC, people called the Persians conquered the Chaldeans and let the Jews return to Jerusalem. But many never took this opportunity to return home. Instead, some moved to other parts of the Persian Empire. Scholars call the diaspora of the Jews outside of Israel the Judah diaspora. The rest of the Jews returned home to Jerusalem. There they rebuilt Solomon's temple, which became known as Second Temple. The Jews remained under Persian control until 330 BC, when the Persians were conquered by invaders. Independence and conquest. Tired of foreign rule, a Jewish family called the Maccabees led a successful revolt in the 160 BCs. For about 100 years, the Jews again ruled for own kingdom. Their independence, however, didn't last. In 63 BC, the Jews were conquered again, this time by Romans. Although Jewish raiders added to the Second Temple under Roman rule, life was difficult. Heavy taxes burdened the people. The Romans were brutal masters who had no respect for the Jewish religion and way of life. Some rulers tried to force the Jews to worship the Roman Empire. The Roman rulers were even appointed to the highest priests. The leaders of the temple were more than the Jews could bear. They called on their people to rebel against Romans. Women in Israel society. Israel government and society were dominated by man, as were most ancient societies. Women and man had different roles. Man made most decisions, and a woman's husband was chosen by her father. However, a daughter could not be forced into marriage. A family's property was inherited by the eldest son, who provided for all children and for women without husbands. Some Israel and Jewish women have made great contributions to their society. The Hebrew Bible describes them. Some were political and military leaders such as Queen Esther and the judge Deborah. According to the Hebrew Bible, these women saved their people from their sister of Moses, were spiritual leaders. Some women in the Hebrew Bible were seen as examples of Israel and Jewish women should behave. For example, Ruth, who left her people to care for her mother-in-law, was seen as a model of devotion to one family. Ruth's story is told as an example of how people should treat their family members. Ruth and Naomi. The story of Ruth and Naomi comes from a book of Ruth, one of the books of the Hebrew Bible. According to this account, Ruth was not an Israel, though her husband was. After he died, Ruth and her mother-in-law Naomi resettled in Israel. Inspired by Naomi's faith in God, Ruth joined Naomi's family and adopted her beliefs. She dedicated her life to supporting Naomi.